Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I am Pat Reinhart of Conductor. I'm so excited to talk about the evolution of SEO and why the future is data-centric with one of my favorite people on earth, Martha van Berkel from Schema App. Martha, how the heck you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me here and just really excited about this topic. We get to nerd out on data, my favorite thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in case folks on the line don't know who we are and why you should care about our opinion. Hey everyone, my name is Pat Reinhart. I lead professional services at Conductor. I've been in the SEO industry for over 20 years. You're going to see a little cartoon version of me follow me around because I'm a Bitmoji enthusiast and I don't think anyone should take themselves too seriously. And I am an unfortunate jaded Jets fan. So I hope for everyone out there, you root for anybody else than the New York Jets. But let's get over to Martha.
Amazing. I always introduce myself with my knowledge graph. It's who I am and how I'm connected to other things in the world. So I have a technical background. I've been in the SEO world for just over a decade now. And I am the CEO and the founder here at Schema App, or the co-founder. I did grow up in enterprise, so I do have sort of an understanding of how things work in large organizations, the complexities of that. And I used to drive a car that was in Kevin Bacon's movie, and Kevin Bacon used to drive my car. And I always love this because I get a chuckle. Thank you, Pat, for just chiming in there, because you've inferred or you've figured out by my knowledge graph or by the data I shared and its relationships with other things that you can win the Kevin Bacon game. And that's what I love about schema markup and knowledge graphs, and what I'll nerd out on today as we dig into today's topic.
All right, very good. And Kevin Bacon, one of the best actors ever. But that's not what today is about. Today is about how everyone is shifting to more of a data-centric, data-centric models, data-centric strategies in the world of SEO, especially with the advent of AI. And speaking of search in general, a great man once told me that no one lies to their search bar, which is a fantastic piece of advice and a good way to think about it, right? And as we go through here, we're not just really talking about Google anymore, right? Data is coming from everywhere. We have folks that are searching on ChatGPT. We have folks that are searching on TikTok and Instagram, on Perplexity.ai, on Reddit. So really, when you think about it, search is everywhere there's a search bar, right? And it is up to us to understand all of the data that is coming from all these different platforms. I always say it's not really just about our .coms anymore, right? It's about the whole ecosystem that surrounds our brand online. But let's all face it, everyone. Search is having a minute right now, right? It is interesting times. We have, I'm seeing traffic down and up. Core updates are happening much more frequently. I think we're not going to see named updates pretty soon. We're just going to be in one constant update as Gemini takes hold of Google's algorithm. But when you look across the landscape, we're not just talking about our sites that are up and down, right? When you think about where other people are searching and where that data is coming from, Reddit is up over 500% over the last 18 months, right? And other forums such as Quora, and you can think of things like Apple support forum, Samsung support forum, and really all different types of forums up. And why is this? Because Google and these LLMs are trying to connect real people having real conversations, right? And that's a huge shift, right? And also where people are starting, next generation of searchers are starting their searches in different places. 40% of Gen Zers who start their searches on TikTok and Instagram. I don't have an account on either of those, so I don't know how that works, but I still receive data about it, and I still have to understand where people are coming from. But again, like Google, is thinking about these things as well. We all should, right? We all should be thinking about that. And of course, the AIO impact, right? AI overviews. So we conduct a study every month about how these are changing. We actually just updated this yesterday, I believe, or 2 days ago. My colleague, Zach Kadish, takes care of that. Very smart. Go follow him. So out of 108 million keywords that we analyzed, about 7%, still 7% of them are generating AI overviews. That's a 1% increase month over month. So we're not seeing this huge rush for AI overviews yet, right? We're really not seeing that yet. But again, a small percentage of a large number is still a large number, right? So you're still talking about millions and millions and millions of queries. Most of these are happening on smartphones at 71%, which is an 8% month over month increase. Just to take one industry, just talking about retail, we have data on all of those. If you're interested, hit me up. About 5% occur in retail. About 90% of AIOs occur in the US, right? So really, we're just starting to see them test it in Germany. It looks like they started yesterday, but most of it's still coming out of the US, right? And that's, like when you think about all those different platforms, I bring it back to what I said before is that, search is not just about your .com. You have to understand where the data is coming from. And you also have to think about kind of like a then and now, like scenario, right? When you look at an organization, where is data coming from and how are people using it? Typically, this is how it looks, right? It's all scattered. It's all siloed. You have your paid team or your dev team, your content team, your SEO team or person, all kind of in these different areas of your office, right? Or different areas of your organization. And they all have separate data. They're all following different processes, all have separate goals. And typically there's a technology there that the SEO typically owns that has all of this data in one place where everyone could look at it, but it's only, it's really only, the SEO's job to kind of do this, right? And when you think about that, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work for that singular person. You have one person that's doing all of these different things. And these boxes could represent anything, right? You could put any data point in here. But these are all the things that we have to pay attention to. And one shift that I am noticing, a big shift that I'm noticing with this change in the industry, is that a lot of companies are now starting to switch towards a more centralized view, right? They don't want their teams to be siloed. It's not that they ever did. This is probably not news, but at the same time, this is how most organizations look. And what I'm seeing now is that a lot of folks are really taking this seriously now, whereas they were like, well, the role of the SEO is XYZ, and I'll get to my my whole spiel on where I think the role of SEO is going. But ultimately, we're starting to see people look at technology to drive these centralized views so that all of these teams can exist in one place. But ultimately, the person that's in charge of this and is most best equipped to understand all this is the SEO professional, because that job is evolving so much and all of this data is coming through and we've always been responsible for it. But now I think like the time is now for us to actually, activate that and weaponize that data, not just for our own sake, but also to inform our organization. I'm seeing a big shift there. And Martha, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of like where you're saying like the fracturing of the search experience, right? Like we've never seen people searching on so many things before. To me, that exacerbates this problem of like data in so many places, right? Would you agree? Like the reason we need that central view is because like if we just look at like, just the Instagram interactions or the Reddit interactions or, reputation on different things or, Search Console or Adobe Analytics, like we really need to see all of that, your conductor kind of traffic and sort of how things are performing. If you see it in one place, you then actually understand how this fractured world, really makes sense. So I think it's, this is so important now,
Mm-hmm.
different from even before, to me, because of this accelerating change of sort of where search is happening.
Absolutely.
The piece that I kind of think through then, like because search is happening in all the different places, is really that question of like remembering that like your web data, right, or your content is actually like at the center of all these experiences, right? So even though it's fracturing, we have control of like that web content, and we need to be thinking about how are we, managing how that's understood and how that's being really sort of absorbed, by these different machines and these different experiences. And so, what I was going to kind of just jump into is a little bit of like, well, why is this so urgent now? And why is the role of the SEO really becoming more data centric and need to know more about things like knowledge graphs and structured data? And I loved this article. It just came out, in February, but it was around, the top CIO challenges. So the people in the top of our organizations who are trying to say, yes, we're going to get more efficient. Yes, we're going to be able to scale, and are kind of signing up for these AI driven business outcomes. And what was so interesting is that they don't have the data ready to do
Mm-hmm.
this. And so when we talk about like that centralized view of data, it's also like, holy smokes, we also need to make sure the web data, right? Let's play in our world of like web optimization, but the web data has to be ready. And they're really struggling to create that. And this is where I think SEOs, with this shift to kind of focus on being data centric, have a huge opportunity. And of course, like we focus on structured data and building content knowledge graphs, which is like again building that data layer, for your web content. And the other piece that we do know, like as a fact, is that these knowledge graphs make these large language models more responsive. So not only does it make it ready, it makes them actually more accurate, which especially in enterprise is so important because of the risk of getting it wrong, right? Those hallucinations as things go. Now, I've been throwing around the world knowledge graphs. I always like to define things when we're talking about kind of data structures. So, knowledge graph is really a structured structured framework where we organize information and we build relationships, right, between entities or between things. So just like I explained who I am, I'm an entity, Kevin Bacon is an entity, and sort of we describe those relationships between them. And so knowledge graphs are becoming more and more, let's say, strategic in this AI world, because one, it allows you to define those relationships, which allow you to kind of get that accuracy. And there's other things that sort of, it does help search engine understanding. So we actually see when we add clarity, between concepts or topics, that it like drives results and higher results. It semantic meaning. So you might have heard like the semantic web. It describes that meaning, right, which is so important around intent. It also does exactly, Pat, what you're talking about, which is like bashing those silos, right? So even though, in an enterprise, you might have different lines of business, people own different parts of the website, they're actually structuring them in the ways they want, they're coming from different data sources, right? Because there's this huge, enterprise architecture. All those things can come, together and sort of make that happen in sort of a consistent vocabulary. And this is around future proofing, kind of making your information really ready for AI. And so one of the things as we think about sort of the role of the SEO, like we're the ones responsible for schema markup and structured data. Now you can also kind of say, by the way, I can create quality data to help my organization with AI success. And I think this is that shift of sort of what is our role, right? We've always thought of our role of just trying to get more clicks, get more eyes. Now we actually can play a role in preparing the data, especially sort of on the web. And, the structured data or schema markup value has really evolved. And, starting with, we love it for rich results, right? Gets us great visibility. It drives clarity. It now builds this semantic data layer, what we like to call as a content knowledge graph. But what's really cool is there's other pieces around content insights, right? Again, what does the organization want to ask your web data? Which again, if you bring it together in this consistent one view, similar to what you said, Pat, that like you now have that opportunity to do it. So I always like to give a tip, like, how do I know if I'm actually doing this right, to actually prepare my data for AI so that when you go to your CIO or your executive, you like have, some evidence. So there's this thing called @ID attributes. They're actually what sort of define what we call the entity home, or like that this is a thing and it lives in this like unique place. And I always like to just like show you like it's actually in the schema markup. So if you just know how to go to the schema markup validator and you can kind of see your schema markup, you'll see it here. And so this is a great way to know, like, are you doing that SEO data architecture job that's going to allow you to kind of, be future proofing, kind of taking this to the next level. And so this is the shift, right? We're going to think of schema markup not just for rich results. It still does that, by the way, and gets great increased click-through rates, but it really is going to prepare your content, for these other use cases that your enterprise is really going to care about. And so this is a sort of again the switch of like being more data centric. And I love this slide. It's the semantic web was like a vision many moons ago, by Tim Berners-Lee, Ora Lassila, and James Hendler. And like this coming to truth, right? Like it's this like connected web, this connected, I like data layer, if you were to kind of say that, many things will be built off of. And it's been the vision since like the 90s. But like I really think that we're there. But this really means we have to change, right? Like we can't be thinking different, like the same way. Thoughts,
Yeah.
Pat?
Yeah, no, and it's interesting right now, especially with the like the advent of AI. I think like folks have been talking about create like connecting all of these pieces together for so long, right?
Yeah.
And like, and even when it comes to like the intent of it, like the intent of a keyword, matching it to a user's query, right? Like all of these concepts have been talked about, and there's been a lot of technology built around doing this. But this is really the first time in history where this is probably possible. Like it's really possible, and you're seeing the shift right now in a lot of sites' traffic, right? Like an example, I was talking to a site the other day. Their traffic is down 30%, right?
I believe it.
But their revenue is up 65%. Now, like what does that mean? And when you look at the topic clusters that they're now showing for, and where their clicks are going, it makes a lot of sense because they're ranking for the right things, right? They're showing for the right topics. They're answering the right questions versus, they were answering 70% of the right, the right questions, and then just had a bunch of garbage traffic that was coming to their site. And I think that that's another shift here that and schema markup it's going to play such a vital role in helping AI models and and LMs understand what a site is about and what topics they are truly relevant for. And I think you're actually seeing that shift in sites like HubSpot right now, where they wrote a lot of adjacent content to their business, but not stuff that's actually about what they do. And all of that stuff, that's what's falling off. My guess is HubSpot's business doing just fine. Their site may not look like it. And yes, it was a big news story, but at the end of the day, my guess is they're doing just fine. They're probably ranking for more of the right things for them. And I'm seeing that across. But again, schema is such an important part of that because it connects all the different parts of your site and allows these models and allows this technology to truly understand what your business is about and the questions you should be answering, and not just they're kind of in this realm. I think we're kind of moving away from that now.
Yeah, two other things. So I talked about that ad ID. Like that's actually where you would actually also define an entity or like a primary topic or related things, right? So if there's a page that talks about that things, like there's things in schema markup that allows you to be like, oh, we're mentioning that topic, and you can like we call them like interlinking in your graph, right? Like you can be like, we're authorities on that. Like that's where we talk about it. And so that will eventually, again, not just help AI and search engines outside of your business, but also inside. And that's again like the shift of like if we think of this as a data layer, it becomes more valuable, again, not just as like who am I going to give it to, because you get to then control who you're giving it to, right? Which we've heard sort of alluded from Google over the last couple of years that there'll be an API. Like I don't think we're far off that, because we want to know sort of who are we giving our data to now that we might not get the clicks, right? We only get sort of a portion of those. So I do think there's like a control point, but also like I want us to think about like what's the internal value, right? Like how do we solve that CIO problem of like data readiness by being SEOs? Like that's the part that I also love. And this kind of plays to this piece that we were talking about, Pat, around like the role really changing. And to kind of be, like keywords to me are just like so one dimensional. Like they don't actually kind of think of this more three-dimensional world that we live in, right? Like we're now able to define all the relationships, between not just what a keyword is, but what a true, not just a topic, but like an entity, like an absolute thing that's like, almost has like this kind of three-dimensional feel to it. And we have to just not think about the words on the page, but truly how the data is being understood. And like the only reason this is important is because of who's consuming it, right? Like if our content is like what's driving that machine, right? We have to be thinking about how we're architecting it. And some of the things like that I talk to our customers about is around, thinking of, machines as one of those consumers. Like it's almost become, one of your personas, right? That you should be kind of thinking about, and how you need to be curating not just the words on the page, but how those words are represented. And really start to understand these semantic things. And we actually talking about Mike King and sort of the New York conference coming up, right? Mike King's done a good job educating people about like how the actual nuances of how search changes. Like we have to keep understanding those types of concepts as SEOs, as we really kind of think about how our content and data is being understood. So that's my 2 cents on like how things are changing. I know you have sort of a different view on sort of the like doers to influencers. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the interesting part right now, with all the change and all the different different aspects that you have to think about, who like a lot of SEOs have come to me over the last few months saying like, I'm really worried about like my job. I'm really worried about like, am I still going to have an impact here? Are people still going to care about what I do? And I say, listen, I always joke that like many meteors have come for us, right, over the years, right? Like none of them have landed right on top of us. We're all still here, but they certainly changed the landscape around us, right? And most of the time, those changes made the role of the SEO more important, right? Like most of the time, it made us more important to organizations. So what I'm seeing and what I truly believe is that who better to man the helm here and drive, and guide, companies and organizations through this change than an SEO strategist, right? Like we've had to we understand all these different platforms and all these different channels. And what I see is a lot of SEOs are going from being doers to influencers and evangelists within their organization. And that SEO has gone from being a singular profession to a company-wide practice, right? Because like the best SEO campaigns in the world are mechanical, right? I always say this, right? Like, and how do they become mechanical? You have a very strong SEO professional within the walls of an organization, evangelizing, teaching best practices, somewhat annoying people about, hey, we need to do this stuff, right? Like, you guys have to pay attention. You all have to pay attention to this, right? And they're teaching the people, and that could be your paid team, that could be your content team, that could be your tech team, your marketing team. It could be anyone within the organization, because search data can influence decisions in every corner of your business, right? Because that's how people search for you. And then ultimately enable you on technology, because the only way to fight AI is with AI, right? Like, you can't push buttons in a certain order and all of a sudden you're outpacing the model, right? Like, that's just not possible. So what I see is a lot less button pushing, a lot more automation, a lot more process building. Like, process is super important to build within your organization, so that you should be thinking, how can I build a process that doesn't require me, right? It doesn't require me to do anything, to push any buttons, right? Because what I see these folks doing is, who are they talking to? They're talking to executives. This is something that a lot of SEOs don't do. They don't go all the way up the chain and knock on the door and say, hey, look at me, look at this stuff. This is important, right? A lot more SEOs doing things like that. Talking to individual leadership, that's like content leadership, technical leadership, again, whatever the pillars are at your company, going and having conversations with those folks, and like borderline making them understand how important this is. Because again, everyone that touches the website impacts the SEO, right? And it's
Well, and this is sort of what my point was earlier with like that CIO top problem, right? Like,
yeah,
they're saying like they don't have AI ready information. And I'm saying like you actually have the keys to the kingdom to knock on the CIO's door and actually, for marketing or for all the web content, like we have that. Like,
yeah,
we've done the schema markup, like we're ready to go. Like, how do we sort of, accelerate that? I'm also hearing like, there's a lot of pressure on IT right now, like, in order to kind of like make this stuff happen, right? And we know that organizations are assuming there's already efficiencies, right? We see this like by them cutting back on certain roles, right? So to me, that's the other angle on this, like beyond who we typically also think we might be our best partners or who we want to kind of be those champions. I do think like the technical teams, the IT teams, and then like I said, the broader marketing teams who are
yeah,
kind of, they're trying to kind of think of, to your point, the processes and the efficiencies, and whether it be reputation management or how we're showing up on these different socials, right? Like how that becomes now like media, right?
yeah.
And how we do it. So that's just my thoughts on like, who we might see as our biggest champions, I think is also evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like we're also seeing like who will actually listen to us now, right? Like, because that's been historically a challenge. Like, you go up and you go up to an executive and say, hey, listen, like your organic campaign XYZ, like they're always like, paid? Like, does this have anything to do with
What?
paid? It's
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about? I don't get a lot of that anymore. Like, when I talk to C-level folks, they know what's going on. They're in it, and that's largely because they have someone who's been haunting them about it, for the last couple of years, which is typically us, right? It's the folks like us who go in and say, hey, listen, look at me, like, I need you to see. And the way that the reason that that's happening is because I believe a lot of folks have started to focus on building efficiencies within the company, right? And that goes to the bottom line, which then goes to the ear of the executive. It's like, oh, like this person's doing X, Y, Z. And then they're building process, they're building internal education, right? Then again, like all of these things lead to building what I believe is going to be a huge factor moving forward, which is building brand authority, right? And that comes from search, from video, from forum discussions, from just, being there when someone has a question. Again, going back to my first slide, is that search is everywhere, search is everywhere, that that there's a search bar. And so that is something that I think people need to take to heart. That's not just about your .com. But one thing that I'm seeing SEOs get better at is that they're not getting too far into the weeds, which is why more people are listening, right? No more am I seeing presentations with, I built XYZ amount of links, and here's all of the, here's the log file analysis I did. They've learned to raise, to kind of like elevate the message to an executive level, which is, what do executives want to see? Red, green, yellow, right? What's working, what's not working, what needs improvement. That, they don't have a lot of time. And that's how they're capturing attention. And with these other entities who, for the most part, would never have talked to them 5 years ago, and now are some of their biggest champions. I have more C-level executives in kickoff meetings and presentations than I have ever had in my entire career, and it's exciting. And that's something that I think, and it's because we're showing them the right data and
Yeah,
not
that was what I was wondering.
not showing them the here's a title tag I wrote. It's like they don't care about that. It's like, no, we did this, and it moved the needle here, and we built an efficiency, so we don't have to hire someone here. That's what they want to hear, and people are getting a lot more tuned into that.
It's sort of that like higher level kind of piece, right? Whether
Yeah.
it be sort of again, sort of being able to accelerate and corporate initiative this, or that like frankly we're ready to do that. We have like a foundation that we can build on because then they can have confidence, right, of achieving their goal. There was a question we got around, how much SEO tasks should we give over to AI tools and tools sort of as part of this shift? Any thoughts on that, Pat?
Totally. I mean, like, listen, AI is one of the greatest productivity tools that has fallen into our lap in our lifetimes, right? I am a strict proponent of not pushing buttons. I think a lot of people are still pushing buttons. You should not be writing title tags on your own. You should not be writing meta descriptions on your own. You should be okay with starting content by generating it and then editing it with humans and fact checking it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think that monitoring your site as well, right? Like people who push like a button to do an audit, like you should get a technology that's constantly, however it works, whether it's something that from Conductor or somewhere else. It's more about the concept of you should adopt an always on mentality. And a lot of the tasks that you're doing every day can be automated and should be, so that you can spend less time on tactical day-to-day button pushing and more time on strategic thinking and strategic projects, because and process building. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. That's how I'm thinking about it. But what do you think, Martha?
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's well, I'm a big believer in like trust and measure, right? So like, like use the tools to get the efficiencies and then do some measures, right? To make
Yeah.
sure it's actually yielding the business results. And I think that shift you have in here of like, move from like task-based to outcome-based. And someone said to me, they're like, oh, I think test and measuring is also like as a like iterative kind of experimental thing is really important because like if the world is changing. Like we've never seen search like this before. And I feel like it's not like incremental changes
No.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's like kind of new playing field kind of changes. And so our mindset also has to shift from that. Like we can't just change a little bit. We have to like really think differently about how we're, again, preparing our content or, building data or, again, to your point, bringing that data together to see sort of a new view that might give us like a novel insight. And I think if we just think of like just the novel small changes, it won't be sufficient in
Yeah.
order to have the business outcomes that we're actually like people are looking for us to kind of lead. And I think the other one is we have to have confidence that like, everything we're learning is worth sharing because
Yep.
like no one knows actually what's going on right now, right? Like
Yeah.
it's so I think that's I would say like the only one that's also more interesting is that, SEOs as experts in how search works, which is now largely AI driven,
Yep.
we have a unique perspective. And so I joke that, like SEOs can be the hero for a lot of their organizations in this.
Yeah, and I unsung here and have been, by the way,
Yes.
like for many years, and I think this is our time. And again, like you said, it's bigger, broader, like, like changing your approach, not just I push buttons in a different order, right? And it's more like, hey, listen, like I'm going to let a lot of the button pushing happen with technology. Technology exists. They can be my best friend. They could be a whole nother employee for me. And that's how I look at AI. It's like another employee, right? It's like, okay, this is something, that's going to help me. But then it can bring all of these teams together. So again, the SEO can focus on education, evangelism, more strategic projects, and they're teaching the rest of the organization how to do these things. And, kind of bringing everyone together, right? Instead of just the SEO, having the technology, that technology is being used by everybody because the SEO has brought it to everybody, right? Because that's a different approach. It's not, hey, I have this technology, I'm going to give you the insights, you're going to listen to me. It's, no, I'm going to teach you how to use this, and then I'm going to start the snowball rolling down the hill, and then it's my job to bring you guys along for the ride and make sure the snowball doesn't roll off the mountain, right? Like I have to continue to guide it, and that's really how I think about all of this.
Yep, love it. There was a great question here. I'm just putting my answer in, typing it in. And it was a question of like, how do we see this shift from AI centric compared to traditional? I think it's like this much more broad view. So instead of just thinking of I'm optimizing for Google and Bing, it's like who are the consumers that are providing service that I need to be optimizing for? And then the other one that I think has been the biggest surprise that I see as huge value is efficiency, not just in how we externally make things available, but how we reuse it and get internal efficiency value. So that's like what I've been really hearing resonate, especially with senior leadership that we've been talking to. We're at time,
Yeah.
Pat. Can you believe it?
You're
Like
right.
we just like jammed through that. There's two great resources here. I'll talk about mine if you want to know more about entities and knowledge graphs. That's what we love to talk about. We'd love to share that knowledge. So you can download that there. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And Pat, wrap us up.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Martha, you're one of my favorite people in the industry. Thank you so much for joining. We do a couple of these together a year. Go look at Schema App. They're a fantastic technology, fantastic company. The QR code here is for my webinar. If you like my jokes, you like my Bitmoji and my cartoon self, come to 3030. We do it once a month, usually the third Thursday of every month. It's 30 minutes, in search. Thank you all so much for spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with us. We truly appreciate it. We wouldn't be here without you. And Martha, thank you again. And hopefully we will see you all next time.
All right. Thank you, Conductor. You guys rock.
Thanks, everyone.